So here I am still in Kyiv, and I am delighted to be joined by Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, retired. I'm not going to go through the whole biography. I don't have my script in front of me. I'm in the field here, so I'm going to keep it light. Many of you are probably relieved at that. If you want to know more details, please do check out the description. And before we jump into this, I think it's also worth saying that we are still doing our fundraiser for Vampire drones. I'm sure Ben won't necessarily object, even though these things do have, dare I say it, some kinetic purposes as well as logistical purposes. Not everyone's comfortable with that, but please do help us to get that fundraiser over the line. It is for one of the most effective battalions in Ukraine, Khartiia, that are operating outside of the Kharkiv direction, and of course, very close to and on the Russian border there. So please do check out the link and help if you can. Ben, I'm delighted you could join me, and especially it feels very poignant that I'm in Kiev and we're having this conversation after an extraordinary week of strikes, which seem to be intensifying. First of all, how are you?
Jonathan, thank you. I'm fine. I'm envious of where you are. Not so much the shelling that you're enduring, but I am envious of the fact that that you've got such good granular feel. You're there so often in Ukraine, and you bring an analytical approach to what is the violence, but also the emotion and everything that's happening there. So for me, it's a privilege to join your program again. Thank you.
Thank you. And of course, I will be sharing with the audience and with you details of what I learn here. It's an ongoing learning process. Let's kind of start with that one actually, because yeah, we will get on to the shelling and the drones and so on and why that might be intensifying. But the impression I get here from people who know their stuff. Now, I'm not embedded on the front, and I've not actually been to the zero at all. I put my hand up and say, I've been close, but not actually on it. But when I talk to people who do that, who do liaise with, let's say, those who are advancing drone warfare and experimenting, it seems that actually it's accelerating, but we're accelerating, but at a slower pace. So we're chasing a moving target and one that is accelerating away from us at ever greater speed. How on earth is the West going to catch up with this?
Well, this is something that many of us are wrestling with. Why is it that we still, in the year 2026, halfway through the year, are still unable to stop Russian drones that fly through Romanian airspace or Polish airspace or Baltic airspace? Why are we still not able to stop that when it's not even 1% of the scale of what Ukrainians are dealing with every day? Um, but it's also unfortunately it usually takes a disaster or a real calamity uh, to cause the kind of change required. I mean, let's be honest, the Ukrainians were not the same force in 2022 that they are today. I mean, they had to go through near-death experiences as a nation to to unleash the creativity and do the things that they're doing now. Ideally, all of us in the West could avoid that disaster by doing what needs to be done now, but that's just uh, it's not as easy to do as one might think, but it does require um, leaders to emphasize the need for adapting to new character of war and prioritizing that over proving that what we already have works.
And we're gonna turn to Crimea, I think, in this because we talked about that in 2022, 2023, and how psychologically important that is. It now seems that the capability has caught up. Before we get into that, though, it does seem that the Russian strikes against civilians are increasing in frequency, in intensity, in scale. I would say they're indiscriminate, and they do feel indiscriminate. And actually, many of the messages we get out about them create the impression they're indiscriminate. I won't give details, but actually, when you're on the ground here, I mean, Russians don't care what they hit. So if they're aiming for some strategic objective and they miss it and they hit an apartment block, let's be clear, they don't care. But one does get the impression here that actually quite often they are aiming for strategic infrastructure. They are aiming for governmental institutions. but more often than not, they actually miss these. And of course, we will never hear details of when they actually hit factories and key installations. So there is an interesting information war going on here. And Russia aren't purely going after strategic objectives, but everything is increasing in scale. Why do you think that is at this point of the war, where it also seems that Ukraine is actually gaining momentum?
So I think there are a couple of reasons why the Russians are doing this. First of all, this is how they have always done it. I mean, absolute brutal force, bludgeoning anything that's in the way, um, using their mass numbers. It's how they have always fought. You know, in the Tsarist times, Soviet times, and now. I mean, look at what they did in Chechnya in the Second Chechen War. I mean, this is who and what they are. And they did it in Afghanistan. Civilian casualties were that was just a part of it. It's not something to be avoided. And so I think that it's their mentality to try to scare the hell out of everybody and cause as much destruction as possible, um, not only to psychologically beat down the defenders, but also to scare European capitals that like, oh my God, this is horrible. This could come to us. We need to stop this. And I think that's a part of it. We do know though from history that strategic bombing is almost never going to bring about a decisive result. I live here in Frankfurt, and the Allies bombed the hell out of this place and most every other city in Germany for years. But that was not what finally broke the Wehrmacht. It was, you know, the manpower and the leadership failures, and then just being overwhelmed by Allied technologies and capabilities. Same thing with us. We bombed the hell out of North Vietnam. We bombed the hell out of North Koreans. I mean, that by itself doesn't work. So the Russians are not going to achieve a decisive effect with this approach. So key will be for Ukraine to achieve their strategic effect with their long-range precision strike, which goes against oil and gas infrastructure, factories, shipyards, you know, these kinds of targets. I think that has the prospect of achieving decisive effect much faster than the Russian approach. Um, just what can we do to help protect Ukrainian citizens from what the Russians are doing?
And this is an interesting point that I met someone this morning who makes this point. They've never been to Russia, but they come from a Russian-speaking area. And actually, she said that that logic applies to Ukraine, and we know it does, that there's indiscriminate bombing against civilians is not going to turn anybody against the war or convince anyone to surrender. But she made an interesting point that Russians aren't necessarily like that. And we see that when they're areas are hit and where the war is overt and unavoidable, Russians are stunned and astounded. And they are saying, well, just whatever it takes, make this stop. Not make it stop in Ukraine, but like make it stop here. We don't want to be bombed. We don't understand why this is happening. Is it possible that Putin is actually thinking, well, you bomb the hell out of Russians, they will surrender, in fact, psychologically. And he thinks Ukrainians are just little Russians and they will behave the same way. So maybe there's some kind of psychological as well as informational flaw in his strategic thinking.
I think that's a valid perspective, and I would defer to you on understanding Russians and versus Ukrainians. Uh, the reaction of people to the strikes in Saint Petersburg here yesterday was fascinating. Both Westerners online, people watching, as well as Russians themselves, just couldn't believe that Saint Petersburg was hit, especially during the famous uh, the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, where you've got thousands of foreigners are there to so that Russia can brag about their economic might. And here you've got oil storage areas and a dry dock getting hammered by Ukrainian drones that came over 1,000 kilometers to hit with precision. Um, And then, the thing, Jonathan, that has amazed me about this is not only that Ukraine has continued to improve its ability to strike deep, long range, it's a realization that what was once Russia's strength, its vastness, just the sheer size, it could always absorb invaders and then eventually push them out. Even during the Second World War, they moved a lot of the industry east of the Urals to get it out of range of the Wehrmacht. Now there's no place in Russia that is safe from that. Every corner of Russia can be hit, and that's so this strength of vastness really is a vulnerability because they can't protect everything. And it is a very, very difficult task. Air and missile defense has to be integrated. It's not just putting a gun or a rocket launch or missile launcher next to everything you want to protect. It's a system of warning. And people are highlighting the fact that the drones that struck Saint Petersburg spent about 5 hours in Russian airspace on their way there and were never shot down. I mean, that's incredible. So I think the Ukrainian, the general staff, and people responsible for planning and targeting the long-range precision strike have got to be salivating at all the increasing opportunities that are out there.
Khartiia is a Ukrainian corps operating around Kupiansk, which is a critical area of the front. Now, this campaign won't be for everybody. It is a kinetic campaign in that we are crowdsourcing here for funds to buy Vampire drones, 15 in fact. 5 of those have already been achieved in this campaign, but we are looking to scale this up to get the full amount of 40,000 dollar US. That's going to Jigger's Paw that are handling this. This is an incredibly important campaign. There are many creators who are taking part in this. My view is that it's not enough at this point just to help Ukraine to survive. It's not enough just to invest in humanitarian causes. Not everyone's going to be comfortable with this, but they have to remove the invaders from their lands. To do that, they need the skills, the munitions, the weaponry to achieve that. This is where these vampire drones come in. So please, this isn't a full polished promo. I'm still working on that, but the campaign launches today. Please do check it out and, of course, help in any way that you can. In terms of turning that into political leverage, let's turn to, I think, one of our favorite topics, and one that we launched our first conversation, and that is Crimea. It seems that Crimea may now be more vulnerable than any point since 2014. I'd love to have your view on whether that is the case. But also, the road and rail links from Crimea seem to have become Russia's greatest vulnerability in terms of its position on the front. Its air bases obviously are under threat. We have the Kerch Bridge, which we can come to in a minute. But again, I've heard this from several people here, foreigners asking why the Kerch Bridge hasn't dropped, and Ukrainians saying, these are ones, military lines saying, well, do you know what? Since the first strikes, it hasn't been able to take heavy military cargoes and loads anyway. The load-bearing structure of the bridge is terminally damaged. So even though it's functional, it's only light stuff traveling on it anyway. So is Crimea being besieged now for real because of this logistical vulnerability?
I appreciated that back in the beginning of the large-scale war, and you and I were started talking about Crimea, that you gave me the chance to try and think through what would it take and why does it matter? And I still, even though a lot of people online mocked me for being so optimistic that Crimea was going to eventually fall, it is eventually going to be recovered by Ukraine. There's no doubt in my mind. Obviously I was too optimistic on how fast that would happen. But when you think about the military problem of Crimea, every taxi driver in Kyiv knows where everything is on Crimea. I mean, there's nowhere to hide. What's different now is that Ukraine has developed the ability to hit with precision every one of those places, whether it's an airfield or a naval facility or an ammunition storage site or any kind of a headquarters node. It's all, I mean, there's nowhere to hide. And it's every bit is within range. Um, I think I think that Crimea is the decisive terrain of the war because if the Russians are finally forced to abandon Crimea, I mean, just the psychological impact of this, as well as the physical impact, because the loss of Crimea would then once again open the possibilities for Azov Sea and for Ukraine to begin to, if they can ever recapture Mariupol and Berdyansk, which I expect that they will eventually, then now you've got the possibility of economic possibility as well as the strategic possibilities there. But as long as Russia occupies Crimea, then even if Berdyansk and Mariupol are liberated, they'd never be able to use them. And so I think these things are connected. And if Russia controls Crimea, they will always be in a position where they could disrupt anything coming out of Mykolaiv or Odessa. It really is a problem that has to be eliminated from a Ukrainian perspective. And I can't imagine that Ukraine would ever agree to a settlement where Russia retains um, Crimea. So, how do you get it? I think first thing you do is you isolate it, and that's exactly what they're doing right now. They are isolating that now that they can reach the land corridor, the road. To break a line of communication, you don't have to sit on it. You just have to be able to make sure that nobody can use it, and they are already demonstrating that capability. Um, the uh, the Russians, I agree with the assessment you just repeated about the value of the bridge. It is not able to do everything it was originally designed to do. And so I imagine that the general staff is doing calculations like, is it worth it? I mean, the amount of explosive that would be required to literally drop a section of that bridge. I mean, the risk and the resources is significant. So if they've degraded it to the point that the Russians are having to rely much more on very vulnerable ferries or on the land corridor, this is moving in the direct direction. And then the second part is, of course, making Crimea untenable, that the Russians can't use it. And I think this phase is also underway.
And of course, one of the things which I think, because we've explored it in subsequent conversations, that we perhaps did not or could not predict in 2022 was the self-deterrence of allies, the absolute fear of providing Ukraine with what it needed to actually engineer a victory. I mean, it's possible perhaps they didn't have, the skills, the elite battalions and so on, and prior to drone warfare, maybe they didn't have, a combined drones arms capability to bring that about. But one of the biggest failures, it seems to me, is, and one of the failures that has led to Ukraine developing many of these skills independently, because they had to, is the absolute reluctance of Western countries to give what it takes to win, bleed enough in there to survive. Does that still shock you even to this day, and especially in the context of seeing these strikes, that we're really doing nothing or very little indeed to even prevent this wholesale slaughter of Ukrainian civilians, let alone provide what's required to for them to recover their sovereign territories?
Well, as you and I have discussed many times, it all starts with strategic objective. What is the end state you want to achieve? And the West, I'm talking particularly the United States, UK, Germany, some of the other larger European countries, never have said we want Ukraine to win. It was the best that they could muster would be we want Ukraine to be in a stronger negotiating position, as if the idea of restoring 1991 borders was not even achievable or realistic. Therefore, let's start off by telling Ukrainians you got to give up Crimea as a starter. And we didn't even try. And I think for years we're going to be looking back on the missed opportunities of 23 and 24. That if the various governments had said it's our interest that Russia is defeated and forced to live within their own borders, therefore we're going to provide everything that's needed for Ukraine. we would be in a much different situation. Still achievable, but at huge cost of lives and time. Now, I think that there are some countries that are understanding that it's in the interest of Europe that Russia is defeated. And Gary Kasparov is very good about describing how Russia has never changed until except when they were defeated. And so if they're not defeated, then this is just going to continue one way or the other. But the Russians, of course, knew that how vulnerable our leaders were to the threat of nuclear war. And so that's why this constant, every couple of weeks, Medvedev or somebody comes out and talks about a nuclear exercise, or we'll have to destroy Warsaw, and unfortunately, there's enough people that believe that Russia might actually use a nuclear weapon. I'm sure you've heard it 1,000 times. I hear it every conference. Somebody says, "Yeah,
Almost
but
every day, every day.
yeah." I mean, it's like if they lose Crimea, they'll have to use a nuclear weapon. Like, what? Why would you even say that? I mean, why do you think they would do that? What possible benefit would Russia get from doing that? Russia gets the benefit of the threat, but if they go through with the threat, then they've lost all benefit for any nuclear weapon. So it's not going to happen.
It's incredible how people take these little memes or sound bites, and for them it becomes reality, while ignoring, facts that are quite easy to find out. For instance, we should ask ourselves the question, what's the failure rate on the Oreshnik? And from the assessments of people I talk to, it's somewhere between 50 and 70% failure rate. So are you really going to stuff that thing with nuclear warheads with a 70% chance that it drops down on your own territory? I mean, it's insane. So I
Yeah.
suspect there are good tactical reasons as well as strategic political ones why they wouldn't go down that route.
No, I think the Chinese have made it clear to the Kremlin that absolutely not. No way. That's not going to be allowed.
Now, I'm a good listener, Ben. I remember you talking about logistics and will being two of the key reasons why one side wins and another side loses. Um, how do you interpret then the Ukrainian tax on oil infrastructure? Of course, that's attriting and throttling the war economy from producing, long-range strike munitions, etc. But can there be actual battlefield consequences, especially in southern Ukraine and Crimea, from the tactic to take out Russian oil infrastructure?
I think this is the path to victory, actually, that the Ukrainians have settled on, and their ability to strike deep is only going to increase and improve. And if I was uh, advising a European governments, I would be encouraging them to invest in Ukraine's long-range strike capability because that will accelerate um, their ability to destroy Russia's oil and gas export, which is the key for Russia's sustaining their war effort. Without that, they don't have the financial resources to be able to pay for this war and prop up this artificially structured economy. And I thought you made a good point early on that, Russians are like, hey, what the hell's going on here? How are the, why is the oil terminal on fire again? I mean, so part of this is not only attacking the capacity of Russia to sustain itself, but also attacking the will of the people. Now, I know I'm talking out both sides of my mouth now, saying that Russia's attacks on Ukrainian civilians is not going to be decisive, but the Russians have not endured this since 1944,
They've been
45.
isolated purposefully from the effects of the war, yeah.
Exactly. And so, they haven't felt the effects. And I hear all the time, oh, these Russians, they can suffer better than anybody. I think actually the oligarchs cannot suffer better than anybody. And when people who like that, who do have influence on Putin, when they begin to suffer, I think this is a part of the overall effort. And it would be much more helpful, of course, again, if the West would stop these shadow fleet vessels that are carrying oil and gas to China and India and Turkey and other places. And every single shadow fleet vessel sails past a NATO country, whether it's through the Baltic Sea or the Black Sea. Why aren't we stopping every one of these things? That's why getting the strategic objective right is so important because then you can get the right policies.
And of course, people who are saying, Russians can endure suffering, they're not reading the telegram channels that I'm seeing. Ukrainians are under extraordinary duress and they discuss things often in tragic terms, but in very, very rational terms. If you look at the Russian sources, it's endless whining, 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 whining like little toddlers. So, no, they can't endure trauma and suffering, I'm afraid. I mean, it'll be meted upon them, but their mentality is not built to handle things, rationally, strategically, or finding solutions. So yeah, I encourage people to read some of this stuff and change their perspective. Russian losses. This is another myth that I want to tackle head on, is that Russia has infinite manpower, infinite capacity, etc., and then it can maintain the current loss indefinitely. From the strategy of Magyar and Magyar's birds and others, we can see that the strategy is to dramatically increase the casualty rate or ratio compared to what Ukraine is suffering. And there seems to be strategic purpose in inflicting huge loss on the assumption that Russia does not have infinite human resource.
I agree with that completely. Um, I remember talking to, let's just say, an American in DC a couple years ago that was in a position to know much better. And he said, "Come on, man, the Russians have got like 300 million people." I said, "What?"
How
You
many?
know, that's no, they're like under less than 140 million. And many of the youngest ones are either dead or they have fled the country. So no, it's a very unhealthy demographic as well. So that means that there's a lot of people out there that still have in their mind the old Soviet population. It can just go forever and ever. To me, it's always been interesting that the vast majority of Russian troops come from well outside of Saint Petersburg and outside of Moscow, that they come from the other parts of the Russian Federation, let's say different ethnic parts of the Russian Federation that are much poorer and happy to take a signing bonus to join the army. Um, I don't think this is an endless or a bottomless pit of manpower. Now, the Kremlin, it seems, has studiously avoided um, mobilization that would require them to grab people out of Moscow and St. Petersburg, because then it would be impossible to hide the disaster that's going on. But I don't know. I mean, I was a year ago, I heard Putin complaining about there weren't enough people to work in all the factories. Well, no shit, because they're all dead or gone or deployed. So yeah, I would
They're
question.
pulling in Central Asians, they're pulling in vast Muslim populations from the south. And actually, that's another element of the Russian chatter, which has an overtly racist character to it. They hate this. I know the right wing Christian nationalists talk about replacement theory in the US. There is a real replacement fact going on in Russia. Muslims from Central Asia are replacing the Russian workers who are dying or don't want to do this work or are capable of it.
Well, that's a fascinating insight that I imagine the Ukrainian the guys who do psyops and information operations are targeting that. And the Chinese,
I'm
I
sure
think
they
the
are.
Chinese also are watching patiently as the population of the eastern half of the Russian Federation gets hollowed out and licking their chops.
Absolutely, and there are maps that have come to light with the Chinese replacing, the Russian names with Chinese names. There's a little hint there. We've got it, but just a couple of questions before we sort of wrap up. And I wanted to turn to a topic that's formed a big part of the conversations this week because I've been at the Odessa Security Conference and talking to some guys here who are very deeply involved in drone warfare. Now, you've argued for a long time that NATO would struggle to meet the effectiveness standard of some of the elite Ukrainian battalions, especially unmanned systems forces. And there's been a certain amount of hubris throughout the war from Western politicians and even, dare I say it, from parts of the military establishment, that perhaps could have some weight prior to the increase in drone warfare. But someone who I was speaking to yesterday, people see the interview on the channel, Brian Pickens, he said that at some point last year, he got to the point where he felt no longer able, from his NATO Western infantry perspective, to teach Ukrainians anything that they didn't already know. And then actually he felt that he was being a net beneficiary of learning from Ukrainians. This absolute flip, actually. Now he's here embedded with troops, and in the drone tech ecosystem to a greater or less degree. Western militaries are not doing that or have minimal trainers. How important is it that we are perhaps in an inflection point where Ukraine is geared up for this war and NATO actually is still up the last war and perhaps does not realize how far behind they are?
If I hear any Westerner, whether it's American or German or Brit or whoever, talk about we're training Ukrainians, I am top of my head's going to come off. I mean, uh, my guys noticed back in 2015 and 16 when U.S. Army Europe was given the task to help rebuild the Ukrainian military and set up a training area for them. And so I started off using one of our airborne battalions from Vicenza, Italy, to be the cadre to get this thing going. And we spotted early on. I mean, Ukraine had already been at war for since 2014, so they had already been dealing with Russian drones and artillery and all this stuff. And uh, these tough old U.S. Army airborne sergeants told me, he said, "Sir, this is different. These guys already know how to do, they know how to do this." I mean, none of us had ever been under Russian artillery or rocket fire or had to worry about Russian drones. And so it quickly changed our attitude. And in fact, we changed our entire training area at Hohenfels to replicate a Russian threat versus what we had been dealing with. And I really think that the way that we're going to increase the sense of urgency in the West is to change our training models so that the enemy force looks and has all the capabilities that the Russians have, and you go to the training center and you get your head smashed in until you figure out how to properly counter drones and do all the things necessary that Ukrainians have learned. So the training base is where that can happen. It's not just the technology, it's how to use the technology. And I love the phrase you used earlier about combined drone arms, because people don't come in the box knowing how to integrate everything. You have to go train on it, use it in a very, very harsh competitive training environment um, before you get sent to use it in a lethal combat environment. So that's part of it. But Jonathan, the first year in Iraq, or when the IEDs really got started, the Army, all the services, we were very reluctant to change our equipping plans because equipping plans are set up over decades. And now the idea of getting vehicles that could survive an IED would force big changes. So it took the Congress forcing the Army to develop um, the MATVs and other tactical vehicles that could survive an IED that did not come directly from Army leadership.
And now IEDs can fly. They are drones, in effect. I
That's
mean,
exactly.
the
That's
question here
right.
leads from that. Yeah. 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 Now, the question that leads from that, and I assure you we're approaching the end, but I think this is super, super important. So the point that my interlocutor yesterday made is that that's well and good, but that's based on warfare that moves at a slower pace. Now he says the techniques are changing almost with the speed at which milk goes off. So, how do you create a pipeline of learning that you can actually iterate on a weekly basis, not monthly or annual basis, and create that direct pipeline of learnings from the front to the back end training and then scale that? How on earth do you build a training pipeline based on something that is being iterated almost in real time?
Well, something that many may not realize is that the best units continue training while at war. I mean, obviously you've got people that are committed, security, doing things, but the rest of the unit is not just sitting back, cleaning their weapons and resting. You're training because there's new techniques. So the best units continue to train even while they are engaged. And I remember we would get new equipment, new different devices for communications or counter IED or whatever, and so, of course, you had to train on how to use it before you sent uh, Sergeant Fink down the road with it, right? You had to train on it, and
Arjun
I
Fink
think
wants to sit in a cozy trench well behind the lines, Ben. I just put that out there.
so. I think having this learning mentality and training mentality is part of it. I do think that of course, I have a bias, but that the U.S. Army does do a good job of constantly uh, demanding changes at our training centers at Hohenfels or the National Training Center back in the States, places like that, where I mean, I worked at the training center when I was the lieutenant colonel. We were hungry for anything we could get from where ongoing operations were happening so that we could make sure we were preparing units for what they would have to do. So it's a mentality. Um, and I think the top leadership has to wrestle with. I mean, there's a reality of budget, the congressional oversight. You've got industry competing, and you've got your own experiences. Um, but I would always err on the side of what can we learn from the Ukrainians and then implement it, or what can we learn from the Russians? What can we learn from the Chinese? And this is not just specific to Ukraine. It really boils down to a mentality, and hopefully you do it before the disaster happens.
And we can be assured that the North Koreans, the Chinese, and the Iranians are learning many of these techniques directly from the Russians, maybe at a scale that we're not.
Yeah, well, I would agree with that. I mean, there's no getting around the fact that I believe we were caught by surprise by the Iranians that we were not prepared. So much stuff was destroyed sitting on the ground or out in the open because they never had to worry about it before. Now, all of a sudden, Iran, the inventor of the Shahid drones, seems that they have some of their own, and so we were not prepared. My God, this incident that happened in Romania a week and a half ago, where a drone flew through Romanian airspace and then slammed into an apartment in Galati, up in the northern border of Romania. But that's like there's been 22 different drone incidences in Romania. None of them are getting shot down. Why is that? And part of it is it's not that they don't have technology, it's that the system, they haven't developed the counter UAV system, and also they still don't have rules of engagement. I mean, the mentality. The Poland, even I would have thought two countries, Poland and Romania, would be at the very front of the line of being ready, and they're still not. So this requires some political leadership also with rules of engagement.
No, that's amazing you brought that up because that is exactly the point that this guy made that I spoke to yesterday as well, that we don't have not just the necessarily the right tech, but it's the protocols, the training, the communications. Well, I promise you this is the last question, and it's just a wrap up one, just to bring the themes together. Do you still see the fall of Crimea as pivotal to a Ukrainian victory, an eventual victory, and potentially pivotal to a change in Russia, and possibly that being the terminal loss of face that Putin may not survive?
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely do. Now, I don't know that it'll be like, okay, Crimea, the last Russian drives across the Kerch Bridge, and then the Russians go, well, damn it, that's it. I think it would be part of a larger effort where just the cumulative effect, the cumulative effect of the destruction of Russia's ability to export oil and gas, the continued increase in Ukraine's ability to destroy Russian logistics, with their mid-range strikes, what they're doing, um, it it will become very, very difficult for Russia to sustain the war and even to protect Crimea, to retain control of Crimea, which will not fall, I think, as a result of a D-Day type invasion, but instead the integration of all types of manned and unmanned systems, special operations, long-range precision strike, where the Russians say, we can't stay here anymore. There's no point being here because we're getting hammered every night. There's nowhere to hide. You can't fly out of there. You can't resupply out of there. Certainly no ships can operate from there.
We're
So
running out of fuel. That's another one. They're running out of fuel now on the
yeah,
peninsula.
so that's I think the Ukrainians, the long range precision strike for decisive strategic effect, the mid range strikes, which are eliminating the logistics infrastructure, and then of course the fact that they have been able to stop any possibility of Russian ground gains. The only thing the Ukrainians can't do yet is completely stop these air attacks that are killing civilians. And I'm sure that's front of mind for President Zelensky and General Sirski.
Ben, always a huge honor and a privilege to be able to talk to you. And I think these are some of the most interesting and pertinent themes that we've covered off today. Thank you for the work you do. And thank you so much for coming back on.
Thank you for the privilege, and please keep your helmet close by.
I certainly will do that. Now I figured out how to actually put it on. Yeah. Let's unpack the book, The Dark Heart of Russia, because it helps to explain how we got to this point. It's edited by me, Jonathan Fink, the creator and host of the Silicon Curtain podcast. It's published this month by Gibson Square in London and is already available for order and delivery online, though officially the PR release will coincide with the Phantom Victory Day parade in Moscow on May the 9th. 30 interviews, 30 voices selected from over 1,000 interviews that have been conducted on this channel. And the lineup that we have put into this book reads like a who's who of the people Moscow would most like to silence. Bill Browder, Garry Kasparov, Fiona Hill, General David Petraeus, Peter Pomerantsev, Luke Harding, Mark Galeotti, Keir Giles, Anders Puck-Nielsen, Alexander Etkind, Yuri Felshtinsky, General Ben Hodges, and many, many more. And with a strong set of Ukrainian voices included, it could be no other way. Volodymyr Ermolenko, Alena Holoshka, Sasha Dozhik, Olga Tokariuk, and Alexander Romantsova, among several others. And the timing is not accidental. We are releasing this book precisely as the Kremlin's central myth, the myth of Russian victory, Russian strength, Russian inevitability, is being shredded in real time. Ukraine matters, and I think this book matters, and our support for Ukraine is the only way of stopping Russian imperialism from its eternal outward expansion and the destruction that it brings in its wake.